Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Luke and Muck, and I'm here with Fnatic Caldi for the next match of the Gfinity Hearthstone Spring Masters #1. Now, we've had some great matches so far. Of course, our next match will be Amaz versus Zozus, but I kind of want to give you guys a recap of the matches that have gone off stage so far. So, in Group D, we've had 6-0 defeat 9-man with a score of 3-1. In their first match, Nyria defeated his opponent Tom, the Taiwanese player, with a score of 3-0 in his match. In the winners bracket, or rather in the losers bracket, 9-man defeated Tom 3-2. So unfortunately, for our Taiwanese player, Tom is out of the tournament. And in the winners finals, we will have 6-0 versus Nyria. That will be on the main stage soon, so definitely look forward to that. Also, in Group B, we've had Firebat defeat Green Sheep 3-1, which closes out the group, and it means that Firebat will advance to the round of 8 over Green Sheep. Now, of course, we're going to start off with maybe one of the most popular groups of the tournament, Group B, and we'll start off with Amaz versus Zozus. Now, of course, everyone knows Amaz, right? But Zozus is a very new player that many people might be unfamiliar with. What can you tell me about Zozus?
He's an excellent player. Been playing a lot on the EU ladder, always top 100, top 200-ish. He's been doing really well in open tournaments and qualifiers. I faced him recently, actually in the qualifier of this tournament here, where he beat me and knocked me out and qualified. But yeah, I faced him in Sotak also recently, really a strong player. But this is the group where you have two huge streamers and two, I guess, more unknown online players. And I would actually, in this group, give the online players the edge. I think those will advance, but yeah, should be a good match.
Yeah, of course, Zozus did defeat you, so I guess that's why we're here on the caster's desk and they're there in the booths, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, both players, we kind of have another Cinderella story again. First with Tice and his opponent, then Firebat and his opponent. But now we have probably the biggest Cinderella story because, I mean, if you defeat Amaz, like, it's probably one of the biggest stories of the whole tournament, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, Zozus is a Polish player. He's on Team Black Raven, and he's actually teammates with a player that faced Firebat, Drax. So again, the Archon versus Black Raven rivalry right there, right?
Oh yeah. He's got a revenge for his teammate that got knocked out, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and we also want to talk a bit about the classes both players are bringing to the tournament. We have Zozus with kind of a more standard lineup of Druid, Rogue, and Warlock, but Amaz, you know what? He's going to do it. He's brave enough, he's going to bring Priest. With Priest, he's also going to bring Warrior and Mage, which definitely is probably the most uncommon lineup of this tournament.
Yeah, I'd say Amaz definitely has the defensive lineup, while Zozus has more of the aggressive lineup. I think the Druid will be a huge thing, as it's, in my opinion, favored against all of Amaz's decks. But you also have the Rogue really weak against the Warrior, and the Warlock being kind of iffy. It's strong against Priest, but can really suffer against Mage and Warrior. So should be an excellent match.
And we're starting off with Game 1, Amaz with the Mech Mage versus the Druid of his opponent.
Oof, that's a really nice matchup for the Mage, actually. I would say it's like 65 for the Mage. Depends on the starter, of course. I think having the coin is better for both classes in this matchup. So we see the Polish player with the coin here.
Oh man, look at that!
Wow.
Look at that mulligan from the Druid, and look at that opening hand. Wild Growth and Innervate. Come on, what else could you ask for? And you have a swipe.
Jesus. A keeper on turn 1 now would, yeah. Perfect hand there, yeah.
It'd be pretty amazing. But on the other hand, Amaz has not a bad hand himself. I mean, Cogmaster, turn 1, I mean, the best you can do. Mech Warper, which allows him to possibly play Mech Yeti on turn 3. But even if the Mech Warper dies, you still have the Mirror Entity on turn 3. And usually, you really don't want to play Secrets from your hand. But I think with Mirror Entity against Druid, it's probably the best deal you can get, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think now you might even consider coining out Wild Growth, because you have so many cards that would help you out with the Innovate possibility. But an easy turn from Amaz at least here. The Mech Warper, no-brainer.
Oh yeah, definitely. If the Mech Warper doesn't get dealt with, because it's a card that you usually want to Wild Growth on turn 2, right? But Mech Warper is so strong that you kind of want to like Wrath it or swipe it, that you sometimes really do want to skip the Wild Growth. And if Zozus decides to Wild Growth right now, he might get punished by that really intense curve of Mechanical Yeti into Goblin Blast Mage.
Yeah, I think possibly even going Wild Growth into Big Game Hunter into Shredder would have been a possibility if you'd gone for the coin. I don't hate that curve myself. Of course, most mech Yetis run Dr. Boom, so the Big Game Hunter isn't exactly horrible, but
Oh.
wow. Kessan Mystic, the swing card in this matchup for sure.
Yeah, we've seen Kazan Mystic do really well against a lot of secret decks, but actually I was observing an offstage match between Nine Man and Tom, where Tom got where Tom was playing a Hunter and his opponent got a Kazan Mystic, but it actually, because his opponent didn't get a good enough curve with the Kazan Mystic, he actually still lost the game, even though he got that really huge swing card. So I think this might be one of those games where the Mech Mage start is just so strong that the Kazan Mystic might not come too much into play.
Yeah, I was actually talking with a practice partner of mine who's playing the China in the NEL league, and he was talking about every single Chinese player having a Kazan in every single deck. That's how they go, yeah.
Yeah, we saw it even in the ESL Legendary Tournament where all the Taiwanese players, they brought Kazan Mystic in pretty much all of their decks. I remember after day one of ESL Legendary Series, Chalky tweeted, "Oh man, my lineup is so good. I brought Freeze Mage and Face Hunter against mass Kazan Mystics in my group." Fortunately, he's still advanced.
What a lineup there with all the fatigue decks, but yeah, it's a bit interesting. Also, the Chinese players have been favoring the Blood Mage a lot, but yeah, Blast Mage I think would be probably best to trade the Cog Master in first and then go for the Blast Mage, as most 2-drops have 2 health. Give it better than a 1 in 3 chance of killing anything.
Loot Hoarder?
Absolutely what you want, yeah.
Yeah, usually that's a pretty good 2-drop, but I think Zozus really needed something to go for the tempo. This gives him a bit more card advantage, but I think he has enough cards right now. He needs to get out something impactful like an Explosive Sheep or a Doomsayer.
I think looking back, yeah, he might have been okay for him to go for the turn 3, or well, technically turn 2 big game hunter there, but yeah, this line of play is just really strong, having Cogmaster into Mechwarper, into Yeti, into Blast Mage, into Loatheb, into War of Fireball, I guess.
Yeah, Amaz has just curved out perfectly this game. And I think one of the issues that Zozus is facing is that he's had this Innervate since turn 1, and he's also saved the coin since turn 1. So he isn't really getting out the tempo plays that he really needs against a deck that really strives for tempo and strives for board control like the Mech Mage.
He's going to be coining Innervate on the Shredder now. It's interesting. I mean, he will have 6 mana next time. Is he thinking about like going for a Force of Nature or something? Because it wouldn't be the strongest thing. Especially if we see a Loatheb coming down, I mean, and if we do see the Loatheb coming down now, that makes the Belcher so much weaker, I guess.
Oh man, everything is just so bad. I think he did really want to play the Force of Nature. I mean, this board is just perfect for Force of Nature, but I'm not sure if he could actually survive the next turn. Let's see, this spare pipe part might be important. Cloak is not really what you want. You want to be defensive. You don't want to hide anything. And wow, more card draw. Again, like the Pilot Shredder, it's dropping these great 2-drops normally against perhaps control matchups, but you really need something that fights on the board a bit more. Now, yeah, just Fireball and Ping. Oh man.
So Amaz taking the first game now, 1-0.
Yeah. That was actually, I would say, Amaz's, or rather, Amaz's most common deck. I mean, Mech Mage, everyone's bringing Mech Mage to this tournament, right? So we're actually going to be able to see his Priest and his Warrior in his next few matchups, and I'm really excited because these are 2 classes we don't really typically see.
Yeah, I think this one went, kind of as Zozus was expecting, but it depends now. Now the Druid will kind of have free reign, I suppose. Should be the Priest, should be the Warrior, so I would expect Zozus to ping the Warrior, the Druid again, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like even though Druid did lose that last match, I think it's all right for him because Druid will be favored against Warrior, and as Amaz always says on stream, Druid is one of the best classes against Priest as well. So I think Zozus can still be pretty comfortable going to the next match with possibly a free Druid win.
Ancient of Lore being the key card in both those matchups, yeah, absolute key. You'd keep them even in your starting hand. It's kind of one of the few scenarios you keep a 7-drop in your starting hand. The only other would be, I guess, keeping Sprint as a rogue and keeping Savannah Hymen as a hunter against Druid and against Warrior and a Priest, yeah.
Yeah, I've actually heard a lot of debate about that. For example, some players like RDU have said, no, you definitely always want to keep Ancient of Lore in your opening hand. But I've also heard some dissenting opinions. Some players also say, no, you really got to fish for that wild growth, that innervate. And when you don't have like a really nice curve and your opponent's Warrior curves really well, like Armor Smith, Acolyte of Pain into possibly a Piloted Shredder, then you're just going to have some trouble. And it's, again, really hard for Druid to come back from the board from an unfavorable board state. So there's arguments on both sides, I'd say.
I think a big part of it is do you have the coin? If you have the coin, then you would be more likely to keep the range of the floor. I mean, let's say you were playing a more aggressive one. Used to see Undertaker Druids with like Leopard Gnomes and possibly even Luthorus. Now we see, I guess, with Mech Warpers and Spider Tanks. So if we're playing a more aggressive Druid, you would kind of be more favored to want the wild growth over Ancient of Lore. But I'd say if you're going second, at least you definitely want to keep the Ancient of Lore. But merit going back and forth on it if you're going first.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. I think Warrior, like we all know that Amaz really favors Priest, and I'm pretty sure, even though I don't have like all the decks right here, I'm pretty sure Amaz is the only Priest in this tournament. So why do you think he's bringing Priest? Is that just a comfort pick, or does he actually believe it's strong in this format?
I think it's both. I mean, Priest is really popular on ladder. For a long time, the number 1, number 2, and number 3 we were all Priests on the EU ladder. Bit because of the meta, I guess, but it's definitely not a weak one. But against Handlock, it's rough, I'd say.
We're actually going into the second match, and it's going to be Amaz's Priest versus the Handlock. It looks to be a Handlock, at least, from Zozus. We've seen recently that Handlock, it's been rising in popularity yet again, but also players have been mixing in things like Demon Lock elements, basically, like the Void Caller, like the Implosion, even.
Yeah. A lot of different, like 5 or 6 or 7 different Handlock, Demon Lock variants. But the thing is with Priests, a lot of them cut the Fast Shadow with Death. It's probably the first thing people actually cut out of it to get more, I guess, consistency in the curve there. But we'll have to see if he actually has cut it. I think if he only has one Shadow with Death, he's in big trouble.
Yeah, as I was saying, there's elements of both Demon Lock and Handlock on the starting hand of Zozus. There's the Ancient Watcher, which is typically only a Handlock card, and also the Void Caller, which is typically only a Demon Lock card. But oh man, look at this starting hand. Void Caller plus 3 demons? I mean, this is the nightmare for Amaz.
I think that the Doomguard actually confirms that this is full-on Demon Lock. There are some variants that play both the Jiraxis and the Mal'Ganis with the but I mean, then you also have Giants as well, so it's kind of a hybrid. But with the Doomguard, there's no doubt that this is going to be full-on Demon Lock. No Egg, I guess, which is really strong, and no Power Whelming. 2 cards really strong against Priest. Also, the Dark Bomb isn't here.
I would say that most players would agree that Priest, pre-Naxxramas, it was definitely one of the worst classes against Handlock. Post-Naxxramas, pre-GVG, still the same thing. And I think even post-GVG, even if you don't play the light bombs in your deck, it's still going to be a very unfavorable matchup. And I think the keys might be these thought steals. Like we saw Amaz versus Reals, one of the most famous matches of all time, at one of the first stream hacks where Amaz just thought stole 2 Mountain Giants and won from there. He's like, oh, I don't need my Priest to have a good matchup against your Handlock. I'll just steal your cards.
And yeah, perfect Ragnaros hits on top of that. But yeah, I think something like, a Circle of Healing with a Zombie Chow on the board, bursting down with Light of the Naru as well. There's possibilities of that for sure.
I really like this move by Amaz. He coined out the Akanai Soul Priest, and I think a large part of that is because of his hand right now, which has 2 Light of the Narus. I mean, he must be thinking that if like a Mountain Giant comes down, I don't even need to use my Shadow Word Death. I can just kill it with the minions and the cards that I have in my hand.
Yeah, I think Wellness Chosen might be okay here. This is looking interesting. Think about if the Jiraxis pops out, then you can Vol'jin a Jiraxis for 15 health on the Vol'jin. How insane that would be.
Yeah, and if it is Demon Lock, typically Demon Lock doesn't actually run many Siphon Souls, and they don't run many Owls. Fortunately, we can see from Zoz's opening hand, I believe, and possibly, yeah, in his hand right now he has an Owl. But of course, most Demon Locks, if he's seeing this card, he's like, oh, there's no Owls. I might just have like a 5/15, and he can't get rid of it at all.
Yes, it's usually 0 or 1 Owl, I guess, depending if you want 1 or 2 Dark Bombs as well. But an Owl here definitely the hand. I think that's probably what we're going to see coming down. I guess the other merit would be to counter the Sylvanas, but I think Shadow Flame is also really good against Sylvanas, so it depends on that. Is he about to overtap? Okay, you've got the 10th card there. Going for the Owl, I really like this.
Yeah, it basically stops the Akanai from really accomplishing anything. And I think Amaz really needs that Akanai. He was really relying on it to use all the cards in his hand. Circle of Healing, Nara the Naru. He needs the Akanai effect to activate them. And essentially with the last turn, the Owl kind of negated the Villain's Chosen completely. It was a really good trade from Zozus.
But yeah, an awful thought steal. Now this is not the Amaz that I remember with those thought steals. It comes a bit back and forth because before GVG, Slot Belcher was so big, but now people have been, cutting the Slot Belcher in favor of, I guess, better 5-drops. But so the priests have actually been going to 2 Holy Novas and no Shadow Madness instead. So I think that's also gonna be better for the handlock in that matchup.
Yeah, I mean, how can Amaz even deal with the Sylvanas? I mean, this is one of the most tense boards you can have against a Demon Lock deck. There's a Sylvanas always, like, it creates so much tension on the board. And of course the Void Caller, you have no idea what that summons, but you know that because he played it, he probably has a demon in his hand. And because he has so many cards, he must have like a really good demon as well.
I think Circle here is a must, absolutely. He may actually want a Light of the Naru first. But yeah, Light of Naru, Circle, and then possibly into like a Vol'jin wouldn't be bad, or into maybe Shadow of Death.
Well, the Arcanine is actually silenced, so he doesn't have the, the damage effect. Yeah, these two cards, the Ancient Watcher plus the Sun Fury, it's a combo, I guess, right?
Oh, yeah.
But he eventually actually has to play those cards because he actually might run out of cards to play, run out of space in his hand. It's just really unfortunate overall. And I think it's the RNGs is kind of repaying him for getting 2 Mountain Giants against Reals. RNGs is basically saying, you can't get that lucky against Handlock all the time, Maz.
Oh yeah, really slow turn, not what he wants to see. I'd say Zozus is in a commanding lead at this point.
That's actually really interesting. The Organized Soul Priest went straight for face. I guess he's not afraid of Molten Giant on this particular turn. But we might be seeing, there's 2 Light of the Narus in his hand right now, so if he draws his second Akanai, he might be able to put together some kind of burst.
Like the thing is most Demon Locks actually cut the Molten, so I guess it's maybe part desperation, wanting to just close the game as he is behind, part just being confident that he knows that there's no Molten Giants coming, but some of them are putting it in though, so it's always a bit of a risk.
Yeah, I think one of the strengths of Demon Lock these days is there's so many variations out there right now that you can't really be sure if they have Molten Giants or not. We've seen multiple variations of Handlock / Demon Lock just over the course of the day, and some of them do have Moltens and some of them don't. And I think Amaz is making the call that he's so behind right now that he just can't afford to play around that Molten Giants. I mean, even if his opponent does play Molten Giants, he just might not draw them, right?
Wouldn't Light Bomb be okay here, I guess?
Well, Light Bomb against Lotheb, not the greatest. Yeah, yet again, there's really nothing on none of the cards in Amaz's hand are very effective at all.
Are we talking just Ancient Watcher Sun Fury here, I suppose?
You know, this is actually probably one of the reasons no one brings Priest to tournaments, to be honest. Demon Lock / Handlock is getting a bit more popular lately. Plus, you always have the possibility of running into Rogue, which Rogue is one of the most popular classes in the metagame right now. In the last Kingwin for Charity tournament, we actually had Rogue was the second most popular class being played, only under Druid. And again, Druid is another class that typically isn't very good against Priest.
Yeah, exactly.
As quoted by Amaz himself.
And the thing about Conquest is you only literally counter one deck, like Jackie did it essentially, just hard counter that one deck and beat it 3 times over, and that's actually something that might happen in this match here, as the Priest weak against Rogue, weak against Warlock, weak against Druid. I'd say it's Warlock is probably the most manageable matchup out of these 3, but yeah.
Yeah, as for those of you who don't know, Chalky, he played in the Root Conquest tournament over the weekend, and he actually brought 3 Fatigue decks to the Conquest tournament. I had a chance to talk with him a bit, and his strategy was basically, everyone's bringing Rogue to tournaments these days, so if I just bring 3 Fatigue decks, which are meant to counter Rogue directly, then I'll just kind of, quote-unquote, throw the other matches, not try to win. Like he's obviously trying to win, but he doesn't necessarily have to win any other matches. He just has to 3-0 Rogue in order to win the tournament. Unfortunately, he eventually got to the wall that's Life Coach, and Life Coach actually didn't play a Rogue, so that strategy maybe backfired a little.
We do see Molten Giants though here, so I'm not sure I like how it feels like Zozus is playing a bit aggressive here. I would want to be at higher life total if I was him, like there's no reason to go that slow, I suppose. Maybe he just feels extra safe because of the board state, but there's also always the possibilities of these, or can I circle Zombie Chow, crazy turns that Amaz is known for. But
Yeah, I think he feels pretty safe at this moment, to be honest. He does see that Amaz has a lot of cards that he hasn't used. I mean, this is actually interesting that there's been a Shadow Word Death in Amaz's hand the entire time, and he hasn't gotten a chance to use it.
Is this Vol'jin Shadow or Death? Vol'jin on the Okanai and Shadow or Death on the Molten?
It's possible, but yeah, I think Amaz is going to do a typical Amaz play.
Oh, just draw non-stop, I guess.
Yeah, draw as many cards as you can, hope to draw into options. This is not a play that many people would see, but it is like, I mean, oh man, Jiraxis. You know what? That's actually good.
Yeah, it's not bad at all.
Jiraxis is a card that just pretty much automatically wins against Priest if you can get it into play as the hero and not as a minion. So knowing that, Amaz is like, I guess it's a more difficult board state, but if I'm able to survive and stabilize, I might be in a decent position in the future.
Are you gonna see this Shadow with Pain, I guess? Wouldn't that be something? With two, what? A 3-11 and a 3-15, and not a common state of the board now.
Yeah, even more cards will be drawn. Power Word Shield plus Light of the Naru is yet an additional card.
The thing with big card draw is it kind of becomes less valuable the slower the deck is, you know. Let's say you're playing an aggro hunter, face hunter, each card is just tempo. The old Miracle Rogue, you know, each card was huge tempo. But you've been seeing these slow hunters, for example, you know, and the priests, like having a slow hunter, if you have 5 cards or 10 cards, it's not a really big difference because the spells are really expensive and you won't be able to play a big portion of them anyway. But with a face hunter or a rogue, you can just empty it all out and, you know, do the power of maybe 3 or 4 turns just in one turn by playing 6 cards, you know.
Yeah. If we see Amaz's hand right now, we actually see 2 Zombie Chows, and just judging from the composition of his deck, and we've seen pretty much about 20 cards in his deck so far, it seems to be a deck that's really geared towards anti-aggro and anti-mid-range. The Zombie Chows, the Northshires, plus the Light of the Narus, plus I believe we've seen 2 Valen's Chosings. They really kind of they seem to deal effectively against decks like Mech Mage and decks like Phase Hunter or even Mid-Range Hunter. But unfortunately, Amaz's opponent is not running either of those. So Priest, as we mentioned, it might just be backfiring.
I'd say this would absolutely wreck a Mech Mage. But the thing about the Phase Hunter, I think, like having practiced a bit with Jackie, you can do so many things. You know, so if there isn't the turn 1 Zombie Chow into a perfect curve, like we saw the Paladin was the main counter to Hunter, but if the Hunter was good enough and drew good enough, he just won anyway. But yeah, this would absolutely wreck Mech Mage there.
So yeah, just casually doing a lot of damage into Amaz. He has the choice to play so many things, but he also has the choice to just pass and be like, oh, Amaz, what can you do against this? Come on, I can take it.
You can never underestimate the Amaz though, yeah, with those.
Yeah, I mean, Amaz, you know what Amaz could do? Amaz could always like play Thought Steal next turn, draw Thought Steal first of all, play Thought Steal, and then get a Shadow Flame. We've seen that happen before, actually.
Molten Giant Shadow Flame here, yeah, wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, Sludge Belcher goes down. Just committing a bit more to the board. But I think at this point, unless Amaz draws something like a huge draw, then it's probably going to be game over. Circle feeling not exactly what he wanted.
Will he be forced into just, I guess, a double Sludge Belcher? And say, you know, just accept that he's gonna die to a
Shadow Flame.
Yeah, Shadow Flame.
Or maybe a second Owl. Die to so many things. I mean, even if he plays double Sludge Belcher, I think he knows that there's like a 99% chance of him not even surviving the next turn. I think this game really turned around when Zozus was able to silence the Akanai Soul Priest. As we mentioned before, the Akanai was like really what Amaz needed to deal with a lot of things that were coming out of Zozus' board. Like we've seen, he hasn't been able to use the Lights of the Naru very effectively. One was just used to heal his Northshire and draw a card. I mean, that's okay, but you really wanted to deal 3 damage, right? And there's the second Light of the Naru sitting in his hand. This first circle, it did draw a lot of cards, but it really didn't give Amaz like the board lead ever in this game. And I think Amaz has been behind the entire board, the entire game so far on the board.
I think so, absolutely. And the thing with Priest, if you want to win these matches that are heavily unfavored, you need a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, curve out completely into turn 6 or 7, and then have that, Holy Fire or that Zombie Chow Okanai combo. Yeah, you need to have everything go right. You can't be wasting 2 turns on drawing. I mean, of course not wasting, but you can't, you don't have the time to spend 2 turns just drawing.
Yeah, this seems to be game over. We're going to have a Shadow Flame. Sylvanas can't steal like the Molten Giant, I guess.
Yeah, I think Roger actually though he had already attacked, so this is still lethal.
Yeah, and we have a tied series, 1-1, Amaz versus Zozus.
Everything kind of going as expected here, I'd say.
So, as Amaz, what do you think he should play as his next deck? He has the Priest and he has the Warrior, and he's looking at 2 unfavorable matchups.
I think it's rough. You really want to have the Warrior counter the Rogue, I suppose, but I think Zozus is definitely going to bring the Druid because it's good against both Warrior and Priest, I suppose. So, I mean, I think they're both weak against Druid. That's the problem. I guess I slightly prefer playing Warrior against the Druid there, so I would probably bring Warrior if I was him.
Yeah, I think Amaz really wants to match up the decks a bit better. Like, his Warrior is probably going to do a lot better against the Rogue than the Druid, so I think he definitely wants that matchup. So, he needs the Druid to face off against his Priest, and I think he needs the Priest to beat the Druid. So I think at this point, honestly, it becomes kind of a toss-up. You kind of want to predict what your opponent is going to play, for both sides even, and then just counter with the deck that's slightly better against that matchup.
Yeah, the thing is, like, you would expect Zozus to bring the Druid, I suppose, but then he could go and do a double bluff and play the Rogue unexpectedly, and if Amaz is caught with his pants down with the Priest there, like, then Zozus just gets a free win with the Rogue, and then there's really no hope left, I suppose. So
yeah. Yeah, again, one of the problems with bringing Priest to a tournament, it has such polarizing matchups, and again, one of the reasons why we don't see it at all, really. The last Priest I've actually seen was Firebat brought a Priest to a tournament, but he didn't actually get to play it because he was knocked out too early.
Oh yeah.
Again, it's a lot about the matchup luck. I think Amaz predicted a lot of aggro decks going into this tournament, but unfortunately, he just got a bad luck of the draw where his first opponent didn't actually bring any aggro decks.
I mean, even a lineup that has a mage is, be really rough against what Amaz is playing. Like, but this is, I guess, the death format for Amaz, having that Druid Rogue Warlock. And we do see the Rogue versus Warrior. And we did see Zozus do the bluff there and go for the Rogue, even though the Druid was more expected. Now, the Warrior is definitely favored against the Rogue, but it becomes stronger when the Rogue has the coin.
So a lot of pros that I've talked to think that Warrior is fairly favored in this matchup. What's your opinion, and why do you think Warrior is favored, or maybe it's not unfavored in your opinion?
The thing is, a lot of the classes that Rogue faces, kinda to just fall in health each turn, while the Warrior can if he can stabilize so easily, and it's way harder to kill him. So Warrior only needs to stay about even in the game. He doesn't need to get ahead. He doesn't, need to go aggressive. He just needs to stay even, and he wins, just by default, because the Warrior, the Rogue, won't enough damage to kill him. I'd say.
Yeah. Even though the Warrior might be considered slightly favored, I think this was one of the best openings that Zozus could have hoped for, a 4/4 Van Cleef. And I think in this matchup, we really need to get those minions out and get those repetitive damage, or the Warrior with the Shield Maidens and Shield Blocks and Armor Smiths, they can just get way too much armor. Like, the Rogue really depends on bursting your opponent down with the Sharp Sword Oil, at least. And without getting that repetitive minion damage, you're not going to be able to deal enough bursts to take down all the armor that the Warrior can potentially get.
A huge hand here for both players, actually. I think I like the fireworks just in hero powering, setting up for Harvest next turn, I'd say. But yeah, a massive hand for both players. Deadly Poison is just huge for Zozus, while the Harvest being just huge for Amaz now.
Yeah, I like this play a lot. When you set up the Fire War Axe, when it says that your opponent can't play any 3/3s without letting it die, and it can't play it can't play Violet Teacher. Because you set up the War Axe, you still save your execute for the next turn.
I'd say though that the hand of Amaz is getting weaker now every turn. Execute and get on not really strong cards against the Rogue. Depends, the Whirlwind is decent, absolutely decent.
Prep.
Prep eviscerate, you're getting that.
Yeah, again, like, it's all about getting that board control and just keeping it. Amaz has like somewhat of a decent answer in this Sludge Belcher. I mean, it's gonna trade pretty badly against the Lotheb, but you know what? It's better than nothing.
A sap is quite huge here. But yeah, Fiery Warlocks at this point isn't really ideal. I think an Execute is likely to come down now. A double Execute even, yeah, that's possible. Maybe Acolyte Whirlwind double Execute? Or you wouldn't need to execute, like you'd only execute Dash Drake. Possibly even Acolyte Whirlwind and Fireworks.
Yeah, that looks good too. A lot of good options for Amaz.
Guess he'll just start with a draw and weigh all his options.
I think this actually, from Amaz, this is a pretty good hand because he actually was able to get double Acolyte in his opening hand, which means he'll be able to keep up with the draw of the Rogue. Of course, Rogue did get the double Azure Drake, but he still he hasn't drawn a sprint yet. He'll have a lot of chances at the next few turns, but I think you really need that sprint against control matchups like Warrior.
I think this is a brilliant play here, going for the Execute over the Fire Warlocks. As you know, Fireworks is a really strong card against Rogue because you have so many 3/3s, and the Execute, if you have already used the Whirlwind, it's not really a strong card, as you know. So getting rid of it is really ideal here.
Ooh, Death Spite. Perfect answer. Not only does that deal with the Drake so effectively, pretty much perfectly, but it kind of forces your opponent to kill this Acolyte, or you'll get extra value from the Death Spite next turn. In addition, it kind of also locks out if Zozus hadn't played his Lotheb, it kind of locks out the Lotheb as well, and it locks any Violet Teachers that Zozus could draw. Speaking of Violet Teacher, here we go.
Now we see him go for the hero part of the shield block, Amaz. I'm not sure about that. Maybe he doesn't feel very threatened, I'd say, but more of the reason I would go for a shield block is just to get a stronger hand, but he gets a shield meter, which is at least something to play next turn. Yeah.
Yeah, Violet Teacher, I think it's one of the best cards in this matchup because the 1/1s kind of are threatening if you don't have the Geddon or Whirlwind. But unfortunately, this is just going to be a vanilla 3/5 that dies instantly to the Death Spite.
I think Geddon here is strong, actually.
Yeah, Geddon is pretty amazing. It forces your opponent to deal with the Geddon too. And normally you don't want to waste your saps on Geddons because it's just 5 health. You can probably kill it. But again, you also don't want to waste Eviscerates on Geddons because ideally you want to save the Eviscerates to kill your opponent. But I don't think Zozus is going to be facing that position anytime soon.
Absolutely, but the winning condition for Rogue here is either to have 2 or 3 minions attacking every turn, which the Warrior can't deal with. And the other scenario is to have 10 cards in hand at all times. And we see Zozus with neither scenario here. Gonna see the second Execute come out, okay.
He's gonna get some stall points for not hitting the Violet Teacher and executing instead.
I mean, it's good to get rid of the Execute. It's something you don't want to keep in your hand until turn 10 or 11.
You know what? The other point is that you've seen Lotheb and you've seen Violet Teacher and 2 Azure Drakes. So what else in this Rogue deck are you going to execute, right? There's actually not any bigger minion than that Violet Teacher.
Oh yeah, even the Edson one Cleave, I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately now Zozus has used basically all of his cycles, and he basically needs a sprint next turn, or he'll fall way too far behind.
A sprint sap would be quite huge here. I wonder if he just slammed the Geddon.
Doesn't seem bad.
I mean, he might have a Brawl, which could, you know, deal with any board that comes up, but Sylvanas is not bad either. Yeah. I mean, there's no real big minion he wants to steal anyway, so just playing it as a 5/5.
Yeah, it's something your opponent actually has to deal with. And if, for example, if his opponent had something like Thalnos Eviscerate, he wouldn't be able to use it very effectively.
I think it's very few rogues actually run 1 BGH in a rogue, so it's also a check, way to check for that, I guess, for Zozus, but yeah, I like Sylvanas as well. It's safer, I suppose, you know. Keep yourself at a higher health total, but now at 30 health this is looking really, really rough.
What the Sylvanas also does is if your opponent does play a minion, you have the option to perhaps shield slam your own Sylvanas to steal your opponent's minion. But sap goes down. Okay, he tests for the sap. It's usually a very good tempo move But if you're just using sap for 2 mana and then you're wasting pretty much 8 of the rest of your mana, then it's not a really good tempo move at all.
Yeah, generally this would be a huge thing, but for Warrior at 28 health, he just doesn't care. But now does he attack? I suppose there's a possibility for a Doomsayer, so maybe he just wants to, make sure.
I think you're not even too unhappy if a Doomsayer comes out, to be honest. Flame Tongue, ooh. That
It can possibly do something, I suppose, with that South Sea and Tinkers. But
yeah, exactly. But and also the fact that he does have the Tinkers means that this Flame Tongue totem can actually be a 3/3, which is kind of funny. Zozus draws into a Fan of Knives, not his best draw, but you know what? If you want to be an optimist, at least it cycles, right? At least he has another chance to draw into the sprint.
this draw will be critical here, yeah. And SI7 just doesn't cut it, unfortunately. This is becoming really dire now.
And again, this Sylvanas is really awkward to deal with. And now that Zozus has used 1 sap, and he doesn't look like he's going to draw another one anytime soon, any legendary that from the Warrior that Amaz draws, like a Grommash or a Ragnaros, Alexstrasza, it could just be game over right there.
He's just going to go face, I suppose, yeah. Interesting. Really interesting. Now there's a possibility for a get-on from Amaz next turn. Stealing the totem or the SI. Probably better to steal the totem.
He's deciding whether to play the SI.
I think you do if you need to be really aggressive. You're gonna go all out. Depends a bit now. I think shield block will be a play here.
Yeah, none of the other plays in your hand really look that good. Oh, Sludge Belcher's a great draw.
Ideal. Maybe he's a bit afraid of the Blade Flurry. As most rogues run 2, and he hasn't seen 1 being played now. With what, 19 cards being drawn already?
What? Ooh, Preparation. Usually that's actually a pretty good card if you have Sprint, but unfortunately no Sprint. We actually see that the Warrior has kept in line with drawing the same amount of cards as Rogue, which usually Rogue is drawing like 10 or so more cards than Warrior just because of those sprints.
Yeah, that means the Warrior is definitely in a commanding lead there. But yeah, the prep is about as useless as you get. It's like drawing an Innovate, I guess, on turn 10 for the Druid as top deck. At least the Wild Growth can be, cycled, but no cycle for the prep at least. Wouldn't that be something if they changed that? Or prep and anti-Borgo cycle?
That would be pretty insane, I'd say. I mean, prep is already one of Rogue's best cards. And if you turn it into like a 3rd and 4th sprint, I mean, that's pretty good, right? Oh, Blood Mage Challenge. He could have used that a while ago. It's another one of his cycle cards, but probably one of his worst top decks. It doesn't really add anything to the board.
What would you say is the best rogue card in your opinion?
The best rogue card? I would have to say... Oh man, there's so many options. You're kind of putting me on the spot here, but I think Prep might be one of the best rogue cards because it's a lot like Innervate, but it's 3 mana, right? And Rogue has a lot of spells anyway. Oftentimes I see games completely swing around when Rogues turn 4, they Violet Teacher, Prep, Eviscerate. I mean, against the deck like Druid, when Druid has a lead on the board, if you do that move, Druid just has no way of responding back when they have something like 5 mana and they can't like swipe and hero power on the same turn.
Oh yeah. Definitely agree with that. I've been training with a lot of rogue specialists, Freshar being one of them, Oskaga being one of them, and what they all have in common, Skip as well. They all absolutely love the Deadly Poison and keep it in most matchups. Yeah, but it's kind of like, I guess, for the Warrior, like, is the Despite the one better or the Fiery Warx?
Oh, I think it really depends on the matchup, really. I mean, Fireworks is just, if you don't draw it in some certain matchups, you just pretty much lose the game. Especially when Undertaker was a thing.
Don't remind me of that, man. Jesus.
Giving you nightmares already. So yeah, we're just kind of going through the motions of the game ending right now.
Yeah, I think Zozus is just, accepting the loss here. And
So I think if Karmasur is right, oh, actually no sprints. So unfortunately, the sprints are in the bottom 6 cards of Zozus' deck.
Probably 2 sprints, I'd say.
Yeah, most players are running 2 sprints, and if they're not running 2 sprints, they're running like Sprint and Auctioneer, or they're running Sprint and Dr. Boom. And any combination of those cards would have been just amazing.
There's one player that actually ran two gadgets on it. That was Orange. He played that in the Kingman Pro League last week. Did not work for him, but I think the deck is still strong.
Yeah, I think players have been like kind of experimenting with those Goblin gadgets and auctioneers. Like Purple Drank, for example, is another player. Just recently joined Team Archon, and he was playing with those double auctioneers, and he actually did pretty well with them on ladder. I mean, auctioneer is a thing. He also played instead of Violet Teachers and instead of Pilot Charter, he's played Gnomish Engineer. So he's like, this deck that was popular like a year ago is still pretty good, I guess, even with like 20 nerfs.
Absolutely. I think they also prefer the shivs then if they're playing two gadgets. Where players, if they play two sprints, usually play maybe one or zero shivs, I guess. Yeah, really a slow card, but yeah, it comes down to the same thing with the gadgets on with the Gnomish Inventor versus the Paladin Setter, I guess. But
yeah.
Now this is the matchup, that I guess Amaz is dreading.
You know what? I think with the inclusion of Velen's Chosen, it might actually turn this matchup. It might make it slightly better. Normally, the Northshire, if you play it on turn 1, you let it die to a deadly poison, or like your opponent plays an Earthen Ring Farseer, and you're just really sad, right? But because you have Velen's Chosen, you can basically trade for their SI agents and Earthen Ring Farseers. Like if he plays Northshire plus Powerword Shield on turn 2, it's going to be really difficult for the Rogue to deal with. And then if he follows up that up with Velen's Chosen, then his opponent is going to need to like expend like Backstab, Eviscerate, Deadly Poison on it, or he's going to need to sap it. And I mean, like, do you really feel good about sapping a Northshire Cleric?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The thing is, in Naxxramas, this scenario kind of came up. You had these, I guess, the Zombie Jiao Undertaker priests that were kind of more aggressive. And those did relatively okay. I mean, the Rogue was still favored, but it did kind of okay. But now with, I guess, two Blade Flurries, it's a bit rougher. I'd say it's still stronger though than playing, just the Wild Paramancer and no Zombie Jiaos there.
I think a large part of it was like players like Zed a lot were using cards like Undertaker in their Priest, and because Undertaker was nerfed, it's actually a nerf to Priest, surprisingly enough.
Oh yeah, that's true actually. Yeah, and I mean Priest was one of the classes that had the best chance of actually dealing with that Undertaker, I guess.
Yeah, we saw it in the Paladin versus Rogue matchup earlier in the day with Tyson, his opponent, where the Paladin player just kind of drew the nuts. He drew double True Silver, he drew Harrison and Lothab, which are pretty much the 4 best cards in the Paladin deck against the Rogue. Now we do see Lothab in the Priest hand, but I feel like Priest kind of doesn't have those cards that really swing the matchup around a lot. Typically, they don't really play Harrison Jones anymore, and they don't really have any weapons, of course, because they are priests. They're a little pacifists, right? So usually, Paladins can solve a really good draw that makes the matchup really even, but I feel like Priest doesn't have that, and they have to kind of play a more honest game.
Slightly slower for sure, the True Silver being a big part of that. But this is about as fast as it gets. I mean, Slug Belcher into probably Lothab into Sylvanas, it's not a bad line of play there.
Yeah, as you mentioned before, Priest is all about curving out really well if you want to be able to beat decks that are typically unfavorable.
But yeah, like I was saying, the Rogue can just play, the value of 3 turns in 1 turn just by all those 0 mana spells. But looking at this, is looking not ideal, but not horrible either.
Mad Scientist. When is Rogue gonna get secrets, right? They seem like a class that would have a lot of secrets. They're very stealthy. They conceal stuff.
Some ambush, I guess. Yeah. Wonder, would you go Lothab here?
I think I would. It basically trades the best with whatever is on the board. If you just play the Sludge Belcher, for example, you're really weak to the spell power of the Azure Drake, and Eviscerate can just wreck you, for example, or even Backstab.
You could possibly also go for the Holy Nova, clearing the board by trading in the Slime and the 5 health Northshire there. Yeah,
that's a good point. Holy Nova isn't a card that typically gets a lot of value in this matchup, so if you want to expend it there and save the much more valuable Lothab for a later turn, I guess that's fair as well.
Yeah, I guess the Violet Teacher with all the tokens would be the only real AoE position compared to the Akane, which could clear the important minions. But the thing is, with the Wild Paramancer and Powered Shield, those are so much better at clearing the Violet Teacher tokens, since you only need 1 damage, and that's what 3 mana, and the Holy Nova is what 5 mana, I guess. So it's a lot slower, I suppose.
Ooh, the prep. Another great card drawn from the rogue player.
There's no sprint again, though. I wonder if he's like, could it be possible that he's cutting a sprint?
I think actually in this matchup, I feel like sprint is maybe slightly less valuable than the warrior matchup, just because the warrior can be much more efficient with their weapons. We saw one of the reasons Amaz won the last game was because he had double Fiery War Axe and Death Spite, and he was just so efficient with dealing all of the rogue's minions. Whereas right now, the rogue, he has the Azure Drakes, so I don't think he'll be running out of cards for a while. And Lothab just kind of the perfect counter against Violet Teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. The strength of the priest is definitely in the board clears, while the warriors is in the fast removals with the shield slams, etc., etc., and staying alive with all that armor. But this is at least giving some tempo back to Amaz. Sylvanas again being a card where you really don't want to play it if there's multiple minions on the board for yourself, so he can possibly trade into all of them. So I wouldn't want to see Sylvanas coming down now. Would favor something like, I guess, Power Shield on the Lothab and Blood Belcher maybe.
Yeah, Power Shield seems like a pretty good draw.
Actually, I think maybe going face would be possible here.
Do you think I guess because you have the Wild Pyromancer, maybe the Violet Teacher isn't as threatening? But I think for most players, their gut reaction is, wow, this board is actually really threatening because the Violet Teacher is a 3/5 that summons minions. The Azure Drake is a 4/4 that has spell power. Just two very dangerous things when you're facing off against Rogue with almost a full hand.
Yeah, it's kind of like playing Priest against Warlock. If you are going face constantly, you're basically telling the Warlock loud and clear, I do have Shadow or Death, or I wouldn't be doing this, and it's kind of the same thing. If you're going face to face, you're just telling the Rogue, very clearly, I have AoE to deal with your tokens, I don't care about the tokens, you can have them, But
yeah.
Maybe he was afraid of the Lothab getting sapped, I suppose, but maybe not as big of a deal.
Yeah, I like this Azure Drake clear. You're not really afraid of tokens because of the Wild Pyromancer, but you are kind of very afraid of the spell power. Spell power plus some kind of Blade Flurry with
or fan or something.
Yeah, fan would even be fairly good right now.
Yeah, I agree with this.
Prep. Like, again, even an Eviscerate would have been great.
She's thinking about Tinkers, I suppose, but it'll be 1 in 3 that actually hits the Violet Teacher. It's kind of a gamble, I suppose. Yeah. I don't know about this. Like, couldn't he just gone for the Deadly Poison? I'm a bit confused now.
Yeah, does he?
I mean, yeah, I don't see the gain of just not going for the Deadly Poison there.
I guess his rationale is that because he can play Lothab on the same turn, that'll be more difficult to clear this 4/1 if the poison landed on the 4, or if the oil landed on the 4/1, and if it landed on the 3/5, would have been just an extra bonus.
That's a really good
So
point, actually. Yeah.
It does make some sense. Like this, because he comboed it with the Lothab, he kind of locks Amaz out of any board clears he might have. He might have also read from Amaz that Amaz does have an extra board clear. Otherwise, I think the Violet Teacher would have been the clear for the Amaz's Lothab the last turn instead of the Azure Drake. So with this, he locks out the AoE slightly. Amaz can still kind of go for the AoE, but it only gets rid of the 1/1s, and you're going to be left with a Lothab plus the Violet Teacher, facing off against just the Wild Pyromancer and like a Light Warden. Not great, I'd say.
It's not gonna cut it, but I wonder now if Shadow with Death, okay. Definitely the passive play. I think Sylvanas was a possibility, but then you're basically relying on the guy not having a sap. He did play a sap last turn, so
Yeah, I like this a lot. You can still play an AoE to clear next turn, so that's going to be fine. Plus, if you draw something like the Circle of Healing, you can combo with the Ocnine and clear even more stuff.
definitely the safer play. I like that from us.
Now, we do see that Zozus, indeed, he does have sprints in his deck. He's just drawn a sprint, and it's going to be very key in this matchup.
And luckiest rogue ever, I suppose, yeah.
Well, I guess in this game, at least, he drew it in the first 15 cards, at least.
Yeah, definitely don't want to have it like, don't want to be drawing on turn 3 or turn 2 or something. There's even better to keep it in the starting hand, but yeah, this is about the time you'd want it, I suppose.
And we've confirmed he did indeed run 2 sprints, and they were indeed the bottom 6 cards in his deck last game.
you always hate when that happens. You know, that's the kind of games that gets a story out. You tell your friends about.
All right, just redaggering. And Amaz looking at this board, he must think, wow, my opponent has this full hand. He very possibly has the second Tincture's Sharp Sword Oil in his hand, and it just might be game over anytime, very soon. Ooh, Amaz is going to do a very Amaz play. He's going to clear the entire board, actually.
Not bad at all there.
Yeah, unfortunately the Life Wharton doesn't get to grow, but you know what? Yeah, I think he'll take this. Clearing the board kind of disallows for any Tinker Sharp Sword Oil plays, so I think Amaz thinks he's fairly safe unless his opponent both has the deckhand plus the oil.
There's no fan as well from Zozus, so it's looking a bit rough.
I guess he has to use the Blade Flurry now.
Not the best idea, but he has two at least, so he can, spare one, I suppose. But he would want to be building this up with something like a Vital Teacher.
Oh, is that just game over? Yeah, that's game over.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So again, doing rogue things, he kind of empties out his entire hand in one huge burst, and not only does he clear the board, he clears Amaz's face.
Now we're going to the fifth game now, 2-2. Every matchup going as planned, I suppose, as when you compare to the usual way those matches go. Now we have Druid and Priest coming up.
Oh man, that's the matchup he didn't really want. I mean, he didn't really want the Rogue versus Priest, but he also didn't want the Druid versus Priest. And you know what? He didn't even want Priest versus Handlock either. So going back to the point where Priest might not have been the best pick to bring this tournament. Unfortunately, Amaz he might have brought the Priest to kind of appease his fans. He hasn't brought Priest to a tournament in actually a very long time, but unfortunately, it might not work out in this round if he has to face off against the Druid that might possibly draw Wild Growth. I mean, who am I kidding? They always draw Wild Growth.
Absolutely, or the Innovate. But now I think the one drop will be absolutely crucial here, drawing the Zombie Chow, the Noshia Cleric. The 1, 2, and 3 turns, how you actually beat Druid. You get 3 minions ahead, so when it comes to them, playing their first minion, you have 3 minions on board, and you can clear that with maybe a board clear, etc., and then add the 4th minion on and kind of snowball from there. That's what the Mech Mage did against the Druid so far, and that's what the Hunter likes to do as well. So, but the Innovate can kind of throw that out of proportion, playing a 6 mana on turn 4, etc. So, yeah.
I talked about this against the Rogue matchup, but I think again, Violence Chosen, it's the tech card that Amaz put in his Priest that isn't really found in other Priests, and I think it might be the key card that he needs to win against Druid. Turning those Northshires or Zombie Chows into these huge minions that his opponent has to pretty much use a Keeper of the Grove on to kill is just really nice value. I mean, against Druid, typically, the Zombie Chows, they don't do very much, but if you turn Zombie Chows from 2/3s into, 4/7s, they're like they're kind of like Fungans, really.
Oh yeah, I remember when I tried that out the first time. I was playing against the Acro Hunter, I guess, with the Valence Chosen, and I played a Zombie Chow into a Leper Gnome, and then he played an Animal Companion. I just Valence Chosen it and killed it.
Easy.
Yeah. For such value, I mean, you can kill that for hours with all those Circle of Healing, etc., and the hero power there. Yeah. I
believe the last time Valence Chosen was used in a tournament was when Hosty actually played against 6-0 in Deck Wars, and Hosty actually kind of forgot about the spell power from Valence Chosen. I mean, no one really remembers the spell power. You just want the stats, right? Mm-hmm. And he accidentally pinged the wrong thing with the Arcanized Soul Priest.
Oh.
I don't think Amaz will make that same mistake, though. And, of course, the final game is about to begin. Priest versus Druid.
I think it'll be huge now, exactly getting the 1 drop. If you start, you can get the tempo rolling, but I'd say the coin is better for both players. It keeps the Valence Chosen interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, as I was saying, I think Valence Chosen is just so huge in this matchup that he actually keeps it. He does run 2 Zombie Chows, at least 1 Pyromancer, and probably, almost certainly, 2 Northshire Clerics. So there's a very large possibility that he gets something to Valence Chosen. And if he doesn't, you always have the Dark Cultists, right?
Now the end turn is yellow. Okay, I've lighted the Naru. Not gonna be useful now, I suppose. But we do see an Innovate, no Wild Growth. We have the Shredder. Now the thing about Priest, if you're playing against Priest with Druid, what you want to do is you want to get a 4 damage minion onto the board as soon as possible. So either a Taunted up, the Death turn for priest to faces, turn 1 to the Cloud Haunted. That's basically game over, for a priest. If you can kill the Dark Cultist before you get another minion on board, if you can kill the Injured Blade Master before he gets healed, if you can kill the I suppose the Zombie Chow or the Nausea Cleric, and that's exactly what we see here. An innovate out from Zozus with turn 1 Pal Desferrer. Like, is literally nothing. I mean, a Pyromancer is about as good as it gets though, but we do see a Wrath there from Zozus.
Yeah, I really do think the Pyromancer is going to come down. It contests the Pilot Shredder so well, and you have to, as a Amaz, you have to hope that he doesn't have that Wrath, but unfortunately that's exactly what Zozus has. Fortunately for Amaz though, even though like he has his opponent had a great start, he has all these 5 drops and 7 drops in his hand, so at least Amaz will be able to kind of play out his hand and have some respite against his opponent if he doesn't draw like a Wild Growth on turn 3, or even worse, the Shade of Naxxramas.
Oh yeah, the thing here is he may need to go out of the Naru double powered shield. I think the more likely is just heal pass. But yeah, I mean, you want to play the Dark Cultist with a powered shield. I mean, there's not much I guess Zozus could do against, just if he ends the turn now and goes Dark Cultist, set power shield next turn. He's gonna be taking 8 damage, I suppose, but it's not a big threat at this point.
I think you're not too unhappy. Oh wow.
Shade. Wow.
Perfect draw. That was a huge draw. I think you're not too unhappy if your opponent trades though, I guess. Ooh, Ship's Cannon. It's probably just gonna be a vanilla 2/3 unfortunately. Unless we have Pirates Druid.
Oh god, yeah. Blingtron, what? All that stuff, I suppose. Now lighter than Naru, what?
So this is the play you suggested on the previous turn, actually.
I think it's gonna heal though, yeah, to buff the Light Warden now, but interesting one still. This is again, like if he could develop that Dark Cultist and play the powered shields on it and go for the Valor's Chosen, he could have, set himself up in such a nice way. But
unfortunately, that was another epic draw from Zozus. Thrath, pretty much everything he needs. Like even though he innervated out the piloted Shredder and he didn't have many other plays in the following turns, he basically drew fairly perfectly into the Shade on turn 3, into the Wrath on turn 4 plus hero power, and he's gonna get so much. He's gonna be able to curve perfectly into 5 and somewhat perfectly into 6 with the Harrison Jones, and then 7 into Ancient of Lore, and then who knows what.
The thing is, he went for 3 damage instead of just pinging, going for the hero power and running the cannon in. I think that's really interesting. As he figures he has a turn 5, 6, and a 7, he can afford to do that, and he definitely can now with Dr. Boom. So he feels that the damage and the board percentage is more worth than draw there.
I think if you have the Ancient of Lore in your hand, you're not too worried about cards. A 5/5 body plus 2 cards in turn 7, pretty good.
I'm gonna see Vol'jin powered shield, I suppose. Oh wow.
Well, unfortunately, some technical issues, but we'll be getting back to the game as soon as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, technology, of course, is the vehicle of esports. And we just have to deal with the cards that we're given sometimes.
Oh yeah, the recent patch updating that spectator mode, really making things interesting sometimes.
And we're back. So, of course, we saw Vol'jin come down and the powered shield, as you predicted. Pretty much the only thing he could have done. And you know what? Drawing pretty much one of the best creatures in his deck again, the Sludge Belcher.
It's getting interesting now. He's playing more around the Okanai and Circle, more so as the Shadow Madness, I guess. So it's, looking 4 months back, Shadow Madness was played in every priest, but now it's basically non-existent. 2 Holy Novas, exactly what people play instead of that.
If only Vol'jin had a Valen's Chosen buff, then this board might be slightly more manageable.
Oh yeah. One silence, I suppose, be pretty nice as well. You can clear most of the stuff though. Yeah, I suppose.
Well, half of the stuff. Exactly 50% of the stuff, and this shade is just gonna grow and grow, man. I don't know what to say.
Oh yeah, I actually look at it from the value of the minions, as the ship's cannon is like almost nothing for me, while the 5 drops are, threats.
So the big question here, it's turn 7, Kaldi. What do you do?
Dr. Boom, always.
Dr. Balanced. The Vol'jin's actually just a 6/7. He's like, I can't actually deal with this. But you know what? There is Velen's Chosen, so it might get some use.
Fun the curve that I had to face against life codes in the King Win Pro League recently was turn 5, Dr. Boom, turn 6, double swipe, and turn 7, Force Nature Savage Roar. That is pretty hard to deal with, actually. Yeah.
I think in the recent King Win Pro League, Savit's actually got like a turn 3 Dr. Boom. Pretty insane. He won that match, by the way. Just wanted to let you know.
Oh yeah.
In case you were wondering.
That's. I think the most interesting counter to that Dr. Boom innovated out is the Wild Pyromancer Hunter's Mark combo for 2 mana. That's actually played.
There was actually a bug in Hearthstone previously where if you played that combo with an Acolyte of Paint, you would just win the game because the game bugged out.
And that's all you saw played, I guess.
So Zozus is playing a bit more conservatively, I guess. He didn't really want his opponent to run his Vol'jin into the Dr. Boom, possibly with that Velen's Chosen buff. But he actually is not. He's actually kind of rewarded for this because Amaz doesn't have a. He doesn't have a Shadow Word Death. If Amaz had a Shadow Word Death right now, he would have a decent possibility of actually getting back into this game, because it would have been a pretty big tempo swing to kill Dr. Boom for 3 mana and then just load up the board again against your opponent that just has 2 Boom Bots and no combo in hand.
This doesn't feel as hopeless as it did earlier, actually, I'd say. You can go what, Dark Cultist, Zombie Chow, and Velen's Chosen the Zombie Chow. I kind of like that. He's behind, of course, but he doesn't have a Savage Roar. Zozus doesn't, so it's manageable. But yeah, he's definitely behind, though, Amaz.
So you're thinking Zombie Chow and Velen's Chosen?
Yeah, and throwing Dark Cultist on
okay, yeah. Yeah, very nice.
It's risky, of course, and it's always easy to say when you see both hands, I suppose. But for this hand, that would be better. But if one Savage Roar back and forth, and everything is changed.
I think one of the keys of playing Druid is playing against Druid is you have to identify when you can't play around the combo. And I think this is one of those times. Usually, kind of newer players, they're always kind of wary about the combo, and they're saying, "Oh, I have to survive against the combo." But if you play around the combo, you usually have a weaker turn. And the next turn, if you clear the board, they put down more minions and even a bigger board, and you're like, oh, I guess I have to clear again. So you clear again. Then the next turn, the same thing happens, and it's just a never-ending cycle where eventually you won't be able to play around the combo. So it just might be better early on as a priest or as any deck just to kind of not play around the combo in an earlier turn.
It's what actually players sometimes need to do is, you think I'm only gonna win this game if I draw this here. So you sometimes have to just go on a limb and hope for that draw. But
the game's over.
Absolutely, the top deck Savage Roar.
Yeah.
I think that was actually the right play from Amaz still.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, actually. There's not really. He could have kind of cleared some of the board. I mean, he could have cleared the Boom Bots, but how are you going to play around the Savage Roar top deck, right?
I think it's always stronger to actually, go for the 1 in 5 or whatever when you're way behind than just slowly drowning, I guess, in the board there and becoming further and further behind every turn. So just rather, take the big risk when you're in the position. It's always hard to assess when you're in the position and when you aren't, So, but I think that was a good play by Amaz, for sure.
Yeah. So Zozus wins that series, and he gets revenge for his teammate Drex, who unfortunately lost to Firebat earlier in the tournament. Zozus is in a pretty good position right now. He's in the winner's match, which means he just has to win one more match to get into the round of 8.
Oh yeah, my prediction is coming true. Hopefully, I predicted at the beginning of this match that Fake and Zozus would be the ones advancing, but I have to see now. Now coming up, we have Forsen versus Fake. Should be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Forsen, of course. Forsen, he's I wouldn't say he's done the best in tournaments lately, but he's definitely looking to prove himself. Whereas Fake, he's not as well known of a player, but he's actually had a lot of success in a lot of qualifier tournaments, especially. He qualified for VGVN number 2, I believe, where he was really put on the map. He did really well with 6-0's Shaman deck, and he actually defeated 6-0 with his own Shaman deck. We had a funny moment on stream where both players were playing the same deck. They actually submitted the same deck list, and they were both named 6-0 Shaman. So everyone, the entire audience thought we made a mistake in production, and it was like, oh, you guys put the wrong decks. But it was actually both players were playing the same exact deck list, and they named both their decks the same exact thing. And it actually happened where Fake defeated 6-0 in a mirror with his own deck.
I mean, that just happens, you know, it comes down to draw so heavily, I suppose, in those mirror matchups, but it's very interesting. Fake actually is the King of the Hill on my King of the Hill show on YouTube. Yeah, he beat Rainier and is going up against Kranitz in 2 weeks. Just upload on to the Fnatic YouTube page, I guess.
Yeah, I was talking with him about it, and I was talking to a lot of other players, and I didn't watch the games myself, but I heard Fake played really well in those matches.
Brilliantly, yeah. A lot of small technical plays that, you know, a lot of players wouldn't have seen, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, Fake is one of the top legend players in EU. He's always on those lists, at least top 20 all the time.
Yeah, now we're going into a quick break to set up for Faramir versus Forsen versus Fake now, coming up. So stay tuned, guys.